Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this late afternoon session. I know it's been a long day for a lot of you. My name is Melissa Fung, and welcome to this discussion, assessing the threat of illicit trade. As Joe pointed out earlier, this is a $68.5 billion problem for our country. Much of it is controlled by criminal gangs and cartels with tentacles across the globe. The trickle-down effects are immeasurable, right down to the consumer, you and me. Why is it so pervasive, and does law enforcement currently have sufficient tools to deal with the scope of the problem? It is such an enormous issue to tackle in 44 minutes and 33 seconds. But thankfully, I have four of the most knowledgeable people with me on stage here. Their full bios are on the website. I think if we went through all their accomplishments, we'd be here for the next 44 minutes and 18 seconds. To my left, the Honorable Stephen Blaney was a former Minister of Public Safety from 2013 to 2015. And before that, of Veterans Affairs Canada in former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's government. For many years, he also worked in Quebec's engineering sector, particularly in water purification and energy efficiency. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you, Melissa. Merci.
Beside him, we have Ben Parent, who is the General Manager for Power Generation at Cummins. Welcome, Ben. Rick Barnum has been the Executive Director of the National Coalition Against Contraband Tobacco since 2022. Prior to this, he was Deputy Commissioner and Provincial Commander in charge of investigations and organized crime with the Ontario Provincial Police. Welcome, Rick.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you.
And last but definitely not least, Joanne Crampton was, until 2019, the Assistant Commissioner of the RCMP, responsible for serious and organized crime, financial crime, cybercrime, and human trafficking on both a national and international level. She's currently a senior advisor at Deloitte. Welcome, Joanne.
Thanks, Melissa.
You've all had a front row seat to what's happening with the underground economy in our country. So I'd like to maybe start with getting your thoughts, just what's top of mind for you on this topic. I'll start with the Minister.
Well, I can start. First, on top of mind, I just want to thank everybody for being here at the best session on illicit trade of this event. What's on top of my mind? Basically, if it's too good to be true, then ask yourself some question. It is not true. And I would say the best, we will talk of policy, we will talk of many issues, but the best way to be prepared is each individual, when we are facing, we're put in front of a choice, just to make the decision. Sometimes it's a short-term gain. It's very attractive. It's cheap, and you're tempted. But in the long run, you may just risk to hurt yourself, and you may end up, whether putting at risk your safety. Some will say, your health. So if it's too good to be true, then it's not true. So move on.
That's a good place to start. Ben, what's top of mind for you?
So for me, it's more from a technological point of view, counterfeit. You have a piece of equipment, be it mechanical, electrical, electronical. You purchase it, and in Canada, when you buy, and I'm just looking at the light bulbs we have in the room here and the wires that feed those light bulbs. In Canada, you assume that what you purchase is safe. No harm will come from those devices to yourself, your family, your loved ones. When there's counterfeit goods, from a technical point of view, I'm always concerned, will the device catch on fire? Will my brakes work on my car if I have counterfeit brake pads? Will my tire stay inflated, or will it explode? So I've been involved in counterfeit, and I got to be careful when I say that, French to English. I've been looking into counterfeit issues for a long time, and it's always for the safety of the public of Canadians. Thank you.
Rick.
Top of mind for me, and it's even more top of mind now, perhaps, that I've retired, so I'm not working in organized crime enforcement every day anymore. And it's become more clear to me that the issue that I think about most is government revenue sustainability. And why I say that is having more time to look at the issue and study it closer, be involved with a certain aspect of it. The billions of dollars that leave our province and our country every year, every month. I don't understand how we can sustain to continue to lose this amount of revenue in the future and still have the lifestyle that we have now.
Joanne?
And I guess for me, thinking about everything that everyone has mentioned, I add to that, I guess, is the aspect of organized crime that's involved in this. So be it counterfeiting, be it human trafficking, be it drug trafficking, a whole gamut of issues and crimes are being committed by organized crime. And in Canada, some ways that they funnel money and clean money, called money laundering, but cleaning dirty money and turning it into clean money so they can use it in the economy or take it offshore and into other countries. But one piece that comes to mind is through illegal gaming or unregulated gaming sites. We have them absolutely rampant in Canada. It's a $4 million a day industry that goes out of the country, out of the province. And that's money that could be staying in the province and funneling into healthcare, which I know is top of mind for most Canadians, education, other social programs as well.
I would just I fully agree with just what Rick and the Deputy Commissioner said. On one hand, you are just going to short circuit our system. This is not going in the health system. We are here in nice places. We pay taxes, everything, but this is going in the black market. So our system, our institution are not, supported. And where is this money going? Well, into the dark side, if I can put it that way. So it's and as Ben would say, mention you endanger your own life. So there are some aspect of it that worth consideration, and that's why in the long term it's not really a good decision, although it may seem very appealing at first sight.
I want to talk a bit about contraband tobacco, and I'm looking at you, Rick, because this is your area. It accounts for over $2 billion of lost tax revenue in Canada per year. And in this province, that's, $750 million a year. Why is this still such a big problem? I feel like when I was, in the last century, a local reporter reporting on this, it's hasn't gone away.
It's really not that complex of an issue as far as I see it. But the reality is it's, as you mentioned, it's billions of dollars. It involves every level, every layer of organized crime that you can imagine. And when I say organized crime, it's easy, it's sort of a phantom thing. But the reality is, if any of us in this room had a truck full of cigarettes, you are probably not just going to be able to sell those overnight or in a week or maybe even a month. You need a network. So the whole aspect of organized crime is having an established network, in this case across our country and beyond, that can deal the tobacco out. So the real issue of, like I say all the time, contraband tobacco is an absolute organized crime issue. It's nothing else. It's absolutely organized crime at the highest level. And it's billions of dollars a year that go out to feed other sort of interests that they have, whether it's human trafficking, methamphetamine trafficking, production, whatever. So the reason, in my opinion, it still exists is it's $1 billion crime that people will fight for. And if you follow international news at all, you'll notice that in Australia, in the last month or so, there's actually been contraband tobacco wars where people are dying in the streets over the issue. 27 convenience stores been burnt to the ground in Australia. And when I meet with politicians now and interest groups, I basically tell them, here's where we're at, but here's where we're going. And it's very clear where we're going on this issue. And the reason, contraband tobacco is about 400% more profitable than the best cocaine you could ever get your hands on. So
Wow.
You can't get pure cocaine. It doesn't exist. But if you had 99% pure cocaine, you will not make near the profit margin you can make on contraband tobacco. For instance, in British Columbia, for a carton of cigarettes, $170, $180 for a carton of cigarettes. So that's 200 cigarettes. That's for $180 over the shelf. You can go out if you have the context, if you have an access to a network, and buy that same carton of smokes for 40 to 50 bucks. So when governments increase taxes on legitimate cigarettes, I understand that, and I understand the lure of that money into a government. And when I talked about sustainability earlier, the province of British Columbia, who has the second highest cost of cigarettes, has since 2018 put the price of cigarettes up by 36%. Last year, their revenue dropped by 2%. So where's it going, right? And it's just so funny that when you do the math on that, the real quick numbers, it indicates that our studies have proven that there's about 35% of the market, at least in Canada, that is consumed by contraband tobacco for smokers. So some people think there's less smoking. That's why the revenues are dropping. Our studies and the one that Ernst & Young did less than a month ago, which is an excellent study on contraband tobacco in British Columbia, Ontario, and Newfoundland, indicates clearly that the market and for contraband tobacco fueled by organized crime is growing in Canada. The number of people smoking are not decreasing at the same rate that our revenue created or that we're losing is.
So what should governments do if they want to discourage people from smoking, which is why they are raising taxes?
Mm-hmm. And I don't sit here by any means saying go out and smoke, not at all. But the reality is, I think what governments need to understand is basically revenue protection. And I think it's vital now that we need to turn a corner from a policing perspective to understand that a clear role for policing is not all simply public safety in the community, driving around the cruiser and doing the stuff that is absolutely essential, but there's also a dire need now to refocus and find ways to protect the revenue that our country deserves, so that the people have voted in politicians and the politicians have followed that mandate, and there's a need to protect that, or we're going to be, continue to be in big trouble.
I hear the word politician, Melissa, and I want to jump in as a former politician. And Rick is mentioning something really right. It's okay, to put the best law, and in this case, put the stretch, the price of cigarettes to the limit. So the price is so high on the market that the illegal price becomes very attractive. So we need to be responsible. If we are just to increase taxes, and make some calculation, as Rick mentioned, at some point you are counterproductive. You encourage the illegal market, and you put a lot of pressure on the law enforcement authority because the incentive is there. So the responsibility of regulator is try to minimize in some way and find the balance. Of course, you may be able to get cheaper goods on the black market, but with some I would say some risk, because there's the fear to be caught in this case of contraband. But and the other side, you have to put to set a price that is it costs to smoke, it costs society. But if you put the price too high, well, then you'll have no gain and you'll have just the bad impact. So there's this balance we have to put when we think of law, that we have to think of the law enforcement. There's a limit to what they can do if the incentive is too strong. That would be my perspective from a former politician.
So we've talked about contraband. We've got another problem is counterfeit. That's also part of the underground economy. And Ben, I'm looking at you because this is, your area.
Well, so first I'll start with technological counterfeits. When you go to the store and you buy a microwave, all right, you expect the microwave to serve you, not to set fire to your house. One of the ways to ensure that the device you purchase in Canada is safe so that there's going to be a little logo on it, either CSA, the Canadian Standards Association, CUL, Canadian Listing of Underwriter Laboratories in the US, CNTL, and so on. There's about 10 or 11 of those certification organisms in Canada that make sure that when you buy a device, it won't turn your house into a fire. So for me, the first thing is when you purchase a device at home, look for one of these markings. Is there a certification agency marking on the device? If there is, from the beginning, you should feel safer. At the other end of the spectrum, and I had to purchase a cell phone charger recently because mine stayed home and my cell phone died. No problem. I'll go in a little corner store and I'm going to buy a cell phone charger. So I buy the cell phone charger. And it's just a reflex. I look at it and I don't see any markings whatsoever on that cell phone charger. Okay, not a big deal. It's just a cell phone charger. I put it in the plug, put my cell phone in, and I say, I'm going to do the 30-second test. I'm going to put my fingers on it. And the temperature was just increasing. Okay, so I discontinued using that cell phone charger because I was concerned that we would breach a threshold where it could start a fire. So from a technology point of view, anything that we build, beautiful Royal York, like we are today, schools, hospitals, everything that we goes into building the Canadian economy, you should make sure that it's not counterfeit. Because when it is counterfeit, it did not go through some rigorous testing. We call that the EAT run test without going into too much details, but you test every electrical equipment in Canada for EAT run to make sure that when the temperature rises, building won't catch fire. Look for that certification mark and stay away, as Minister Blaney said in his opening remarks, from deals that look too good to be true. If it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true.
How is this getting into our country? How are these goods getting imported in or being smuggled in? Why was it so easy for you to just go to a corner store and get something that clearly wasn't certified?
So that's a very interesting question. And I'm not going to answer your question by question, even though I'm really tempted right now. But how many containers can we physically open in all the port of entries of Canada? And Commissioner, I'm looking at you for help on this one. You don't have to give an exact answer, but what would it cost the Canadian society if we would add to open every single container that comes in Canada? And how much backlog would we have on the goods, right? Mm-hmm. So there needs to be a balance where you have trusted importers to Canada, that what they put in their containers you trust. And then you have the first-time company that imports something in Canada, and then, well, you're not sure exactly what's in it. Mm-hmm. And then you're probably going to go look much more deeply into the container. I don't think that with 37 million citizens in the great country that is Canada, we have enough financial resources to inspect every single container coming in.
Well, that leads to my next question for you, Commissioner. Does law enforcement have adequate tools to deal with the scope of the problem? And do we even know what the scope of the problem is?
Well, I think we can only estimate what the problem is and how large it is. And most of it is grossly underestimated. Like when we think of human trafficking, labor and sex trade trafficking, it's hugely underestimated, in particular in Canada. And that's very well known in the policing community. I would say police do have the right tools. We have solid legislation for organized crime. It's all about applying it and having enough time and enough resources to do it. It's, I think police are very well trained in Canada overall, but it's about resources. And what is the greatest priority of the day? Is it terrorism today? Is it financial crime? Is it organized crime? Is it the list goes on. And there's some really significant serious crimes like human trafficking, like we were talking about, that simply don't necessarily get the attention they deserve. But it's all part of organized crime as well.
Is that because sometimes they're considered financial crimes and that is dealt with in the courts less stringently than an actual crime, like or a different kind of crime?
In part, if someone is drug trafficking, for example, a lot of times they're charged for the drug trafficking offense, the drugs are seized. But in order to keep the money and to further the investigation into a financial investigation, a financial crime investigation, it's incredibly laborious. It's labor intense. It's complicated, and it takes a real expertise to do investigations of financial crime and to move them through the court system. You need prosecutors that are well versed in financial crimes. It would be nice to have courts that are well versed in financial crimes so the judges understand it as well. So it's not a learning process for everyone at the time a case goes through the system. So that's a gap, I would say. So it's much easier for police to move ahead with a charge of drug trafficking, charge for that only, and move it through the court system than it would be to continue down the road with a financial crime. But really, that's what hits the criminals. You're now hitting them in the pocketbook. That's what they are doing crimes for, is the financial gain. So if you're seizing assets and they have to forfeit assets, that's what really creates a huge impact.
Rick, you're nodding. You speak from experience.
Yeah, fully agree. Again, one of those things you can reflect upon when you retire. But as I look at the system, I just think it's challenged to get all the cases through in a timely manner and with all kinds of laws that you need to follow for a court case. What I see, when you mentioned earlier about what's the solution, I think there needs to be a whole separate lane for organized crime investigations to proceed into when it comes to court time, where as Joanne mentioned, where the officers have the highest level of education regarding organized crime, not just about building the case and getting a case through court, but prosecutors understand the whole scope of organized crime, so how it impacts your community. Like I say all the time, you drive through any community now in our country and, a 30, 40,000 person community, and look at the number of homeless people that are on the streets, and look at the number of people that are addicted to meth and heroin. And I've sat on international committees where, we were privy to information that came right out of Mexico, where the heads of cartels got together and wrote a letter to the DEA and said, no more will you seize marijuana at your southern borders. No more will you seize hash. Instead, you will find us inundating your country with methamphetamine, fentanyl, and all the chemicals in the world it takes to make fentanyl. We will attack you that way. We will attack you in your streets. And they're here. So people need to understand that when you're working in the system. And I think it's happened in a way that policing and prosecutors, they come to court with huge files and they stay for a day and they just go case after case. It's incredible, the workload that they're under. They don't get the chance to understand the scope of what organized crime is really doing to our country and our communities.
Do you think our criminal code is equipped to deal with this?
Can I answer?
No.
Ben?
Yeah.
So that's a very, very interesting question, Melissa. I'd like to take you back in time, if you give me about 30 seconds. We're in late 1990s, beginning 2000. And there is an event that changes the face of the world forever. I'm talking about the very unfortunate events of 9/11. We had a criminal code at that point in time. We had certain laws in Canada and in our colleagues in the US. And in a matter of months in Canada, we wrote Bill C-36, the very first anti-terror bill in Canada, in a matter of months. In that bill, there were some sunset clauses. One of the first times in Canada that sunset clauses were written in an act. And we had to extend those clauses by introducing bills S7 in 2013. And then another event happened. Two events happened in Canada in 2014. We have the unfortunate someone using a car to kill someone in the province of Quebec. And then we have the issues, Pro Cirillo in Ottawa. And in a matter of months again, Canada gets together, writes Bill C-51, and we have a chance today of having the father of Bill C-51 on stage with us. But they went and they modified the criminal code to address terrorism in Canada. Okay. And a few years later, we made some modification to C-51 with C-59. But the question you asked, do we have everything we need in the criminal code as a civilian, not a police officer? I don't believe we do. Because under which law in Canada or under which article in a criminal code would you prosecute someone who brings a cell phone charger in Canada and does not have a CSA marking on it, right? So I'll pass this to you, Minister Blaney, if you want.
Well, I think Rick has just well described, and you as well, Ben. But you know what? Well, after a terrorist attack, people are sensitive to the issue. So there's a large willing to take action. So what we're seeing now is counterfeit is less, I would say, appealing. And until there is until I would say we are well aware of the issue and the big picture, as Rick just stated it, politicians won't necessarily feel the need to take action. But if we're faced with reality, as and this is coming a serious problem. You mentioned the problem of drugs. You know, it's getting serious. So then there may be. There may the political will may follow the situation. I think that the parallel is not bad, but I think Benoit, you've brought to on a lighter mode. I think you've brought some counterfeit goods here that could interest some of our audience. Maybe
Before we do that, I think Joanne had something to add to this.
I just wanted to add to that too, though. You know, although maybe legislation could be amended or it could be better, I think one of the issues we have is finding prosecutors that really understand organized crime, like Rick said, and being able to apply that law. I know I've personally been involved in cases we brought forward with organized crime charges, and it was difficult to find a prosecutor that had ever used the legislation before, even though it's been in place for many, many years. It isn't tested enough in court, and so there's not enough experience to have a prosecutor that's really well versed in it. Not to say that there aren't some, because there are, but they're an anomaly, I would say.
Can we not use Bill C-51 to prosecute some of these people who are responsible for the illegal and the counterfeit goods that are coming into our country if we can prove that they are linked to terrorist activities?
You just answered your own question. Yes. If it can be linked, you need to be able to create that linkage. So large investigation, using, having partnerships in foreign countries, and absolutely, it can happen.
The other issue we have, if we talk of prosecuting, is the length now that if a case got too long, it just drops.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say, well, I believe that this is not appropriate. A crime is a crime is a crime, and whether it's 2, 3, or 5 years, you should be prosecuted. And I feel in that case, politicians should take action to ensure that the Canadian trust their justice system.
You might be onto something, Melissa, when you bring C-51 for counterfeit. Every time a counterfeit good arrives in Canada, I always ask myself, why? Okay, so why did you take the time to make a counterfeit good? The question will be, well, because I want to make money. Okay, fair enough. It's the next question that's important. Why do you want to make money? Do you want to make money because you want to buy a private plane? You want to buy an island? You want to provide for your children, for your family? You want a certain lifestyle? Then we have provisions in the criminal code to deal with this. But if the question is, why do you want to make money? Well, I want to make money so I can fund terrorist groups all over the planet. Then that's when you take C-51 and C-59 and the modifications of the criminal code under Section 83, and you can apply those. So now counterfeiters, be warned. You're no longer a counterfeiter. You're now funding terrorism. And that's a different situation.
I think the other piece to that is those who are creating counterfeit items are also involved in all the things I mentioned earlier: human trafficking, drug trafficking. child labor. There's a lot of other pieces to that too. So chances are where you find counterfeiting, you're going to find a lot more.
And again, do we have the resources to investigate that to the end right now? Or does law enforcement?
I would say no.
No.
No. You don't.
I rely on the expert on the ground.
I know I promised you I wouldn't give you one-word answers, but no.
You broke that promise. What don't you think public still does not understand about sort of the tentacles of this and how deep it goes into our society? Because the more I read about it preparing for this conversation, I was stunned at just how it's so pervasive.
I would say something like I mentioned at the beginning, something like unregulated and illegal gaming sites. I think most Canadians don't think about it when they bet online. Are they using a regulated site? Is it your provincial site? Is it the province you live in? Because if a province is advertising in another province and you can log into there, that's an issue. You can't, if I live in Nova Scotia, where I do live, I can't bet in Ontario, for example. Regulations prevent that. And so if you're betting on a site that doesn't belong to the province that you live in, it's as simple as that. That's where organized crime is funneling their money through those systems. And, organized crime has many, many tentacles that I think the average citizen is not really aware at all. Like all of these things we've talked about, in terms of counterfeit and gaming sites are huge in terms of organized crime.
But wouldn't that be an easy fix? The province can just not allow that internet service provider to put that site online.
That's right. IP providers could easily shut these down, and it would be done. And it's illegal. It's happening, but it's not being touched.
And I think of an example of that in Quebec. So when I do my meetings, I like to, go in and set the case for somebody. But I always, I guess it's part of my training. I don't want to walk out of the room and leave a mess on somebody's desk. Like, here's a solution. And I look at what Quebec's done with contraband tobacco. And one of their solutions they wrote in their provincial legislation is if you are caught with contraband cigarettes in your car, your fine is now the value of your car plus 4 times the taxes of the cigarettes had you bought them off the shelf at the store, and $6,000 minimum fine just for fun, I guess, that goes on top of that for first-time offenders. Second time, up to a maximum of $1 million for all those taxes. Second time, it's $2.5 million maximum and $12,000. But when you talk about the public being aware of what's going on, most parts of Canada, and contraband tobacco, I don't think people truly understand what they're buying and the damage that the money that's coming out of our system going into fuel, whatever. But in Quebec, they do, because they know the value of their car, right? And they don't drive around too often with contraband cigarettes or go and get contraband cigarettes in their car. Maybe they go a different way, but they have the lowest amount of organized crime activity regarding contraband tobacco in the entire country. They've knocked it down by 50% in 5 years, the amount of contraband tobacco usage, and they have the lowest stats of use of contraband tobacco. So I think you can, I guess there's 2 ways, right? The carrot or the stick to educate the public on certain issues. But in most cases, I think you just get back to saving a huge amount of money, and people are willing to take the risk until the risk is too high.
Yeah, so Rick is mentioning an example where policies and regulation can help fix the gap. And in his opening remarks, Joe Clark mentioned that most of the illegal trade is occurring 30% in the residential construction sector, and actually we kind of intervened in 2007 in that regard, and it was not our intent to tackle with illegal trade. In 2008, you remember there was a big crisis in Canada, so we were looking for idea to stimulate the economy, and we said, why don't we come up with the eco-energy renovation program? So what we did is we were providing providing $5,000 of grant for everybody who wanted to replace, have its windows replaced, energy efficiency stuff. And actually, it happened to be a huge success. 250,000 projects were realized. And the thing is that actually, if you want to get the grant, you have to get the bill. So it actually brought many, I would say, residential renovation workers who were in the black market. So, okay, you want the grant? So do a bill, and it brought them back into the market. So same thing for the legislation in tobacco in Quebec. We've seen a lot of arrests in the local newspaper, and it sends signal beware. So of course, fear is sometimes a good advisor when you don't want to, as I mentioned, be caught as well. So there are tools in our toolbox that can be used, to tackle. But the broader approach, I believe, this afternoon is certainly a consensus that we need to get the bigger picture that behind this whole thing, and basically, if we don't do it, well, we are harming ourselves by keeping a blind eye on those situations, because it will catch us in the back.
Melissa, I just had a couple things come to mind.
Yeah.
And when you think about construction, I can think of a couple of investigations that we were privy to during my time. And in the province of Ontario, we had construction where we got a complaint, and we investigated on companies that were laying new pavement in certain parts of the province. And, there's the engineers will come out, and you see it. We've all sat in traffic and we'll probably watch this. They shove it in the ground. They measure how thick the pavement is, and it's supposed to be 6 or 8 inches. So we had a complaint that some of this pavement wasn't thick. So we went around and checked some of these new highways, and we found that the pavement was actually 1 inch thick, and it was supposed to be 8 inches thick. So, but we're getting a bill for 8 inches of pavement, right? So you have hundreds of kilometers of pavement that's not thick enough. It was a huge organized crime investigation, of course, and it goes about. The other one I think of was a big stadium not too far from here, where there were dump trucks after dump trucks bringing fill in to make the stadium bowl. And I forget the exact number, it's test me now, but hundreds of dump trucks would come in a week, and many of those dump trucks would drive in, go around, and drive out, forgetting to dump the load. But on the list where the person's checking, dump truck 12 just came in, check the list, right? Didn't dump the load, but the next 3 or 4 do. So over the course of building a stadium, think of how many loads of fill were diverted to some other, cottage, multi-million-dollar home that just happens to be a way to launder $10 million, right? I built a house, I sold the house, and now I got clean money, right? Done. That easy.
That's pretty hard to police, though. Hard to investigate.
I had lots of people that could count dump trucks. Some a lot better than others, but anyway, I digress.
Joanne.
I was going to say some of that is onus of the company, though, or the government that hired them, or doing their due diligence. There's so much information available on open source, on social media, on the internet. There's a wealth of information on there, and people love to tell people all sorts of things about themselves on there. So really, a lot of that comes to due diligence and making sure that you're hiring the right company and that they are who they say they are.
What about the fines to these companies? Should they be higher? I was thinking of, Joanne, you were talking about IP providers, right? And how maybe they should be fined if they can't kick these sites off. Other countries are doing it better. The Dutch and the Germans are levying, 6-figure fines for providers who are allowing illegal gambling on their sites.
I can't disagree. I mean, it comes to due diligence again. Those companies should be responsible for ensuring who comes on there. What kind of business are they involved in? They can't just turn a blind eye to it, I don't think.
But should fines be higher in this country?
Absolutely. I don't know of any IP provider that's been fined for having illegal gaming sites on their IP. Not at all. Or prosecuted in any way, shape, or form.
Right. I see the clock is ticking down. We've got about 5 minutes left. So I'm just going to get some closing thoughts from all of you. What we've talked we barely kind of scratched the surface, right? But what would you like to leave our audience with in terms of how important this issue is?
Make a confession. I was in New York, we went in a store and we went behind the stores and then there was this great purse, it was a Gucci or whatever. So we bought it, and I think 2 weeks after, it was cheap, basically. It was a cheap purse. So now my wife buys Coach and what is this other brand? Coach and those you can't almost afford because they're 50% off and so on. But at least it's a real one. So get the real thing, and I would say my wife deserves the real thing, not the fake thing. So there's a matter of of authenticity in it. So pay what you can afford, and don't try to get those copy that are basically cheap, and you're wasting your money. And actually, it doesn't really show well on your on the esteem of your loved one. So that would be my advice: go for the real thing or stay home.
Ben, I know you brought us a sample, and I do want you to show it because this is a kind of fake that I hadn't thought of, and it's one that I think some of us might want to be aware of.
So I actually brought an assortment of fake goods. And I know there's only 4 minutes, so for the audience, let's say you want to purchase a very nice bottle of wine and you go to an auction house. How can you be sure that what is in the bottle you're purchasing is the actual wine that was made by that house? So there's a very, very famous case in the US, I won't go into the details, where someone had bottles, they had labels, and they were putting wine in there that had nothing to do with what was on the label. Another house, they were making wine, and we call that a double magnum, or 6 liters of wine. And the house that was making the wine in Europe, and actually in France, said, we never made double magnums of wine since that year. So we're not sure what's being sold at auction right now, but it's not ours. So that's for wine. For those of you who might be into luxury goods, are you sure that the purse you purchase is a real one? Well, if you went to the store, the retail store of the reputable brand, yes, you bought the right thing. But if you went in a dark alley somewhere and you paid $200 for a very nice purse, are you sure you purchased the right purse or not? And then let me ask you this question. When you spent this $200 to purchase your purse, did you think that maybe you were funding terrorists somewhere? Think about that. One of the most famous counterfeit goods on the planet is fake dollars. So, are you sure that all the bills you have in your pockets at the moment, be it Canadian money, US money, or euros, are real? Or maybe a fake or two might have ended up in there? So the counterfeit economy touches everything. And I'll stop there, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick,
Clothing
last thoughts. Yeah.
fast. I think I preach on this endlessly. I just ask that people think about what you just mentioned. That you work hard for those dollars. You expect the dollars to be spent fairly, and you need to make sure that when you're spending your dollars, you're doing it the right way, and make sure that you're not supporting the worst of our society to be richer and richer, because that's their only goal. Greed, greed, greed.
Joanne.
I guess similar to what Rick thinks as well. I think Canada has become, unfortunately, a safe haven for many of these criminals. They're able to live and work here and do their business with impunity, and very few are caught. But the more we contribute to purchasing goods like this, or contributing on simple things like gaming sites, we're adding to the list. And, the less we do that, the less chance that they're going to do business here and take up business in another country. which would be a good thing. I don't want to pay more taxes, but at the same time, I know my tax dollars also go towards our healthcare system, our education, our future with social programs. And the more that's diverted out of the country illegally, the less opportunity for Canadians to live a healthy and productive life.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Minister, you had something else to add?
Resilience, each individual, the more resilient we are to be attracted, the best, our system will be, and that we will cut the demand actually. So the offer should go down.
Well, I think that's true. If we are fostering resilience, we need to know where our weaknesses are. And this is one of them. So I want to thank you all for
Thank you.
a very interesting, fascinating conversation this afternoon. And thank you all. This was a late session. And so I'm really glad you were able to join us. Thank you. Thank you.